Hello, and welcome back to Living Resonance. I'm Monifa, and today we're exploring the cosmic current of the gene keys and the lunar cycle. So you can cultivate your voice, live your genius, and weave your legacy in harmony with the current frequencies. We're currently in the lunar phase of the full moon in Aries, which is gene key 21 and human design gate 21. You're experiencing themes of control, authority, and valor, the genius of nobility. So, as you can tell, maybe a little controversial this time around. Nobility. Um, Beautiful concept. And we're going to hear more about how the high frequency understanding of this word can really change how we are in relationship to each other and when we're leading in our authority. So in Karen Curry Parker's description, she calls it self-regulation. It's willpower. I have a quote from her, by the way. That's what I'm starting on. Willpower is not the source of energy or the driver of your motivation. Self-worth is. You deserve to be wealthy. You deserve to be healthy. You deserve to rest and play. You deserve to fulfill yourself. So, in this nice, brief quote, we get an understanding of what it means to know that you're whole within yourself and that you don't need to be taking out of position or out of knowledge or out of whatever we think hierarchy is born out of. Because in the Gene Keys, we're going to see and recognize how it has been not well modeled and what it looks like in a new world, in a high frequency. So the challenge here in Karen Curry Parker's self-regulatory gate 21 is to learn to let go, to master self-regulation, to release the need to control others and circumstances. So this is the idea that instead of whenever it comes down to force, it's time to let go. You either have to let go of the ideal of the outcome or the thing that you think was should or supposed to happen, and or we need to let go of the need to make people do what you want them to or think they should think or how you want them to think. Okay. And so it's this idea that essentially that we don't want to be in somebody else's way of being a self-directed individual. So you can see how this can go both ways because I think when unkind things are happening, then force becomes is deemed necessary, right? And I think there's a good time to use force, honestly. It is when somebody is, or your actual being is being forcefully um, taken over by someone else who's out of their line. Who's out of line? Who's out of line? Period. Who's out of line? So I think this again is very potent energy for this time because we're learning what does it look like to be in Valor, which is the city, which does, I mean, at least we've seen this week how Valor can be a sense of force, where you can force people to recognize what is right. And it can be a submission. It can be something where you're allowing what is to be. And I don't want to convolute the gate or the key in an effort to be sensitive to what's going on right now. But I think the truth is that even in the Gene Keys, valor is modeled by things such as knights and nobility, right? And so when does it look like valor is when it's for the whole, when it's for the trueness of the ideal without a self-servingness, a sense of you listen to my authority or my hierarchy personally, right? It's about the greater good. Okay. So ultimately, in the Karen Curry Parker Quantum Human Design, Gate 21, this is the ability to regulate your inner and outer environment in order to sustain a vibrational frequency that reflects your true value. Value and values, I would say. So, in that way, this is being able to be not so much in your emotions that you're overreacting and causing more harm than good, and that you're in right action so that if there is force necessary, it's the right amount of force, not a force that would be detrimental in any way, right? Just to say my 2 cents in there because I don't think it alleviates. And that's the thing where it does sound that way in the beginning, in the shadow of this key. I want to go into Gene Keys. So, Gene Keys is what's next. Gene Key 21, the shadow is control. So we can see how we can force out of a sense of control. I'm going to need to force you to do something. And then the gift is authority. So instead of I'm going to force you, I'm going to show you what is right, right? And that may mean action. And then valor, which is the encompassing of the truthfulness of what is right for all those that are under your protection, so to speak. So in the Gene Keys, it starts out by naming the chapter A Noble Life. A noble life, right? And I have to say, with all the problems with different kingships and everything, I think I might not have even been able to say that with a straight face, so to speak, without looking at certain things. Was it yesterday? Yeah, it was yesterday. I looked at a video from Trevor Noah podcast, and they were talking about how Americans are always looking for a representative of the ideals of America. And in that way, they're giving authority to people that don't really deserve it, like celebrities, like people who aren't officials or not officials, but mm, authorities, I would say, but people who have studied something long enough to know all the variables, to know what the truths of how the data comes in, all of that kind of thing. Actual people who've studied to understand those things. And then instead of just somebody who has an idea, has an opinion, has their perspective based on the life they've led as celebrity, just having a spotlight, being heard and then listened to and followed. So somebody was like really annoyed that that's a normal and regular practice in America. And somebody else is saying, well, there's reasons for that. And we can allow for that if we have the understanding that that's not the end all be all. Yeah, I kind of agree with both sides. Like that's a tendency for me, which is why I have a hard time like kind of following a hard line on this is absolutely right. Well, I'm always going to say it's right depending on what's going on. Like I said to start this thing, it's force can be wrong, but it can be right depending on what's going on. I do believe that. I do believe that. And I think that in an ideal spiritual world, there's no force required, right? But until that time, until that time, we have to be in truth of what's in action, in what's going on around us, right? The ring of humanity is the codon ring that the 21 is associated with. When we talk about codon rings, we're talking about how they interact in the chemistry of what is going on in the function of the energy. So essentially, this is a human thing. This isn't, not, and maybe aspects of it in nature or in animals. But in the human nature, we have a tendency to have somebody that we look up to and somebody who's not so much looked up to, right? And it has looked like in the past nobility, right? And so we get this chapter title, A Noble Life. And in that, it's this really what is the truth of nobility, which is authority, which it is a seat of a representation of how we hold ourselves in community as a nation, right? As a lordship, as a nation. It counts. But in the newness of the Aquarian age in Gene Keys, this is the demise of the hierarchy. So that is for this particular like evolution of energy. Well, how are we as humanity looking different in the frequency of authority? And it's because hierarchy is no longer itself a reason to be an authority. And we'll talk about that more in a second. The shadow is control. So what does that mean? So as opposed to, yes, that's what I was going to say. Shadow is control. So this is really about feeling the need to control the area in what's in your area. That's what I'm going to say. What's in your area. And that can include yourself and your body. So it starts there really. Although there's no kind of beginning and end, it just is, right? There is this idea that we have an area of authority. And it starts with, I have an authority over myself and my body. If anybody's confused about that, let me remind you, I have an authority about myself and my body, right? And so it's this understanding that we don't necessarily have control over somebody else's self and their body. Naturally, and this understanding of the evolution of hierarchy. But it also can continue out to talk about the home and or the land the home is on, or it can talk about your family, that those that are within your home, your close friends, your chosen family, who are your part of your circle. It can be your community, and or you can be or your group. So groups can be like other lawyers if you're a lawyer. It can be other artists if you're an artist. It can be religion. It can be people who are also Christian or also a sect within Christianity. It can go on, right? Because there's a ton of groups. It can go on to larger territories like nationality, like race, like culture. So the more we think we have the responsibility to dictate out of the safety of maintaining the territory, the more we believe that we are the police of that territory, the more we'll want to control that area so that it is safe mostly for us if we are not allowing ourselves to let go when it's not really about us, right? So that's kind of the nature of this thing. It's hierarchical. It's like, I am over this territory, so you should listen to me, right? I know what should happen in this space. I know what it means to be in this group. And so you should listen to me. We have a lot of this going on, especially in social media. So this is an understanding, and you get to own your territory. You really do. And if we feel like we're going to control others because it's ours, that's where we get kind of mixed up and we become hierarchical, the old version of authority. Okay. So, what does it mean to be in the shadow of this? In the repressive side of this energy, if we're trying to push away this sense that I have a responsibility here, it looks like being submissive. It means that in the way that we're going to use it today, it means hiding from the responsibility, not recognizing that you can have some influence over your body, over the home, over the whatever, right? On the reactive side, if we're like, no, controlling must happen, it looks like being controlling. It looks like, so the word is controlling. And it's essentially that you have to enact the change, that you are not safe if you do not enact the change, that others aren't safe. if you do and then change, or that you can't handle it. Like you feel like in some way, shape, or form, you'll die if you're not in control. So of course that looks like um that sense of fear that is accumulated within all shadow, right? It's the underlying factor, I should say, of all shadow. The fear of death, the ego of death. Because as you can tell, this is very much an ego, like who am I, and what do I belong to, or what do I belong over, and the responsibility if it's in that shadow, right? So it's just a way of being able to tell when you're going off the deep end, or if you're moving into a lower frequency. Is how Gene Keys would say it. I would say lower vibration of the frequency. Okay. So, so in the gift, what does the authority look like? If it's not just making everybody do what they should do when they're in your territory, then what does it look like? Well, here's one of the quotes from Gene Keys. True loyalty can only be maintained when the frequency of love outweighs the frequency of fear. So the goal here in the gift of authority is not to make people do what you want. It's to inspire people to do what you want. But it is the truth. So basically, to carry yourself with an authority that has the sense of the value of which it holds, which is what Karen Curry Parker talks about. I know about being me. I know about being in this body. I know about being in this group. I know about being in this function. Whatever the authority is, that is not out of fear to maintain the territory, but it's out of love, right? To to unify, period. And so not unify the territory, but unify the whole. And then the second quote that I've pulled is the beauty and magic of the 21st gift occurs when both sides of the relationship surrender to each other. So I love that part because it's true. Like in a very high frequency, there's really no questioning of like who needs to be in control anymore. It kind of flows back and forth in a natural positive, negative, and the chemistry, that's why it's called chemistry, right? Because there's ions exchanged and therefore there's chemistry. And the more ions exchange and the more quickly you can interchange that submissive dominant, however you want to see that, or allow people to be and surrender to the whole's movement and desire and ideal, then the more cohesive the group, the more cohesive the relationship. So that's the beauty here. That's so funny. I just jumped over to that to a completely different screen. So yeah. So instead of being a victim to the need to be in control, this is about allowing your love to be the frequency of inspiration. So that when we come down to the end all be all, that we are choosing who we're loyal to and why, right? And the loyalty is out of the the feelingness that we are being loved and led through love. So the key here, the I would say the barometer, the test that you can take to understand if it's moving towards the gift is this understanding from the Gene Keys. True authority or nobility unites. The noble is for the greater cause, right? It protects the weak, so to speak. But instead of seeing a submissive as weak, just seeing them as not in the time of authority or the time of leadership, that ion might get switched over at any point, right? So we're surrendered to each other in different ways, right? so that the both parties are in service to each other. It's the ideal version of this. And that is what valor looks like. Okay, y'all? That's what I have for you today. As you can tell, I'm a little tired. It's my day 2, and I gave 2 seminars this weekend in one day. So I'm still in recovery, so to speak. So yeah, if you have any questions, if you have any input, how do you feel about this key? What's going on for you in this? We're also, this full moon was also uh 0.5. So for those who know about lines, it was a 0.5 in that. All right. Those who study gene keys know that there's a sense of leadership here as well, not just the line 1 of being in the function of making sure you're doing the actions that keep everybody okay, but in the actual, I am leading the charge. I'm the voice for the ability to be a valor, right? To be the leading voice of love is available, in this energy. So, as leaders of your businesses, of your visions, of your lives, go out, go out and lead with love. I'll see you next time.